So this idea of centerline, it's very funny for me because as a teacher in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I feel like not so many people talk about it, but the ones that do usually have some sort of Chinese martial arts background. Like a name that I could drop for you guys is Tim Cartmel. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and Chinese Bagua practitioner. And Bagua is an internal martial art where you're really thinking a lot about your connection to the floor and how you root yourself into the floor. So what is this idea of centerline? Okay. I tried to go on Google Images and click in centerline. I was like, oh god, this is terrible. It's like a circle with like a circumference and like a diameter. I'm like, oh, okay. This looks like a high school map now. Okay. But all I wanted was a square with a line in it, so this was like kind of close. Center line is just, if I had to cut myself in half, that's my center line, okay? Dividing left and right body. So how I like to think about weight in relation to the center line. If I just stand here, shoulder width apart with my feet, how can I shift the weight from my center line into my left foot? How can I shift it along to my right foot? See, I would never really ever weight shift like this in Jiu-Jitsu because it would take you nothing to push me over, right? If I have this side view of you guys, because I'm so over my center of mass here, if there was any little force input into me, I'm immediately gonna fall over, okay? The same goes if you push me from my backspace. It takes nothing to make me fall forward, okay? This is the reason why we have to talk about posture and stance, right? This is the reason why we have a split stance, because a split stance usually makes the most sense, okay? If I'm at least in a split stance with my feet slightly staggered from each other, see how like now, because I have this forward lean with my torso, my center of mass is automatically a bit more forward and in between my feet still, okay? So if anyone pushes into me, I still have this ability to push into the rear leg, okay? The rear leg is like, it coils, this game of coiling. I have no reference to coiling.
Switching over here.
So, more like a spring, bravo. I don't know why I just want to use the words. So if you're pushing into me, like you're like almost loading me, but I still have this ability to come forward. Okay, so my center, so like I'm available. It's harder to push me over, you know, okay? So in that way, I'm already more ready to engage my partner. Of course, this is only one type of posture that we have in Jiu-Jitsu. It's very common, you see most photo shoots in Jiu-Jitsu, the common poses, which like I think is like, what are you doing? Stop it, you don't have to pose like this. Like, this is only one posture that we have in Jiu-Jitsu. You could completely like, it's very common that like when I'm fighting with someone in a competition that I'm not like, I don't stand down here. Some I'm just cycling with my legs. Like, see how like I'm very off axis actually. If you look at my movement, it's a lot of, I don't mind to be off.
More than people would usually recognize.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like the idea, like you don't want to cross your feet on the same plane when your body is upright. Again, because this idea of center of mass, if you push me here, I can't support myself well. But notice when I cross step, I'm at a diagonal. So I'm already anticipating some sort of, okay. But there's a counterbalance between the upper body and the lower body. And I also know that I'm off balance, but in a way, I know that I won't fall over. Why is that? I have hands, okay? There's also different levels of movement. I like to divide levels of movement into 3 different levels. When I'm standing, this is the high level, okay? When I'm here, this is the mid level now. I'm slightly staggered. Low level, what's low level? Low level is down here now. Might be here, or maybe I'm here, okay? So we have 3 different levels of movement in Jiu-Jitsu.
And in
Again.
dance too, huh?
Sorry?
Same in dance, right?
Yes, exactly. That's how a lot of contemporary dancers describe levels of their movement, because we're always thinking about how do we enter the floor in a safe manner, right? If I start from high to go to low, and I go directly downward, there's a lot of impact suddenly, right? Just like, imagine just like, it's a lot of impact suddenly. Rather, if I make this gradual trajectory to the floor, it's much smoother. Because I extended the period of time for me to enter the floor, but I also went through this gradual change, this level change. And I think it's also really important to know how to enter the floor in jiu-jitsu, because you're not always standing. Otherwise, I think sometimes when we think about the standing exchanges, it becomes more similar to judo, or if you have reference to wrestling. But then I think this is, again, it's a different movement platform. There are facets of wrestling in jiu-jitsu, but wrestling is not necessarily just jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is, for me, mainly the groundwork portion. Another thing with the center line, I like to relate it a bit to the weight shift, and I briefly touched it before, this cycling of the weight between the front foot and the rear foot. You hear about it a lot in boxing, but notice how like I'm stepping between back and forth. It makes it quite easy actually for me to maintain balance in a way that I can still move quite fluidly with my partner rather than thinking. It's a very, that's still a weight shift, okay? But the weight shift, if I had to describe it, is very like, rather the weight shift that I'm looking for is almost like, I like to describe as a parabola. I don't want to jump off the floor, but I go into the floor. There's this like little level change. And it wouldn't be so lateral either, but this is just a gross over-exaggeration of what I want you guys to think about. Like notice how I'm always entering the floor back through my toes. Again, this is very stylistic for me because I do house stance too, and house stance you have the majority of the weight in the balls of your feet, because otherwise it's really hard to rebound and do all these different weight shifts. But also the study of house stance made me further research the relationship of the upper body with the lower body. Because if you're totally upright and you're trying to do all these transitions, you're very heavy on your feet. And the idea of being heavy on your feet means there's a lot of impact. Same in parkour, right? If you land like, that sound is wasted energy. So even this idea of the level change to enter the floor, I don't want this big bang. Like often in jiu-jitsu, what you'll see with level changes, they're trying to enter the floor. Sometimes people would just have a really gross jump and they're like, and there's so much sound and so much wasted energy, you know, and it's a lot of impact on your body if you're training every day. And you keep repeatedly doing that to your body, like, oh, why would you do that to yourself? It doesn't become a sustainable practice. Again, this is just an example of one move. But there are many different movement scenarios where people would just throw their bodies on the floor like, oh, this is a way that I can do it. But you still want to be able to maintain your body for a long time. Like, it's the reason why I have this stylistic preference for myself is also because I want to be able to train the art when I'm 70, when I'm 80. I don't want to, 80 years old with my walking stick, I'm going to impose my will on you. Like, no, that's like, oh my God, I just want to have a cup of tea and have a little fun here. Like, I don't want to do that, okay? We'll go back a bit more to the center of mass thing with the feet, but I'd like to briefly talk about the relationship between the knee and the center line. If I may borrow you, Sam, for a second. So actually, you can stay on the mat, just at the front. Like, go into an open guard position for me. So again, I'm imagining her center line. And now let's bring our attention to the knees, okay? Something that is very common in jiu-jitsu that we would divide it into two different roles in an exchange. Very oversimplification, just to make it clear for you guys, okay? So I'm the top player, she's the bottom player for now, okay? My aim, my objective is to pass her hip line and to get to a superior position of control. So this could be in the side control position, this could be on the knee and belly position, this could be on the mount position, okay? Or also the back. But we'll talk about the back later, okay? But here she's starting with her knees bent. Her legs are a method of distance control, distance management. She's got her feet on my hips as a way to track my movement. Because if she's doing a good job with her feet and her hips slightly off the floor, it's a really easy way to keep me from going past her hip line. She doesn't have to work hard to stop me from here. See, she's doing absolutely nothing to glide here. Like, she's having the time of her life and I'm exhausting myself. This whole idea of movement efficiency is very evident here. Like, how can she connect better with my body to reserve her energy, how to make me more fatigued so that she can find a way to overcome me, okay? Going back to the knee alignment thing though, so what I'm looking for with her knee...
We'll talk about my basic goals at all, or?
Later. So, as a top player, what I want is to put her out of alignment, okay? If I put her out of alignment, it means it'll be easier for me to eventually pass her hip line and to advance into a superior position of control, okay? So what exactly is out of alignment in this situation, okay? When I find her knee going anywhere near her center line, because I have weight, we're not in outer space, although my name is Mars. Bad jokes, I know. But because I have weight, in weight there is gravity, mass times gravity, right? So anytime it's anywhere near the center line, it means whatever movement I do would probably tip her over that center line. The same idea of me standing completely upright, if you exert any force into me, I will fall over, right? I'm just looking for that tipping point where it's going to bring her out of alignment, that now I just have to understand in what direction can I exert more force that will make my likelihood of getting her into a better control position easier. As opposed to her being in good alignment, it's going to be much harder for me to get to a good control position, right? But if we're, again, looking here, I understand, okay, her knee is going this way. In order to create, in order for me to either step past the hip line, or maybe let's say we want to go a step further, how do I create back exposure? Back control being the strongest position in jiu-jitsu, because my partner is not facing me, their movement options become much more limited as well, okay? And when you can't see, it's like, oh shit. What's going on, right? If I understand that her knee is going to tip past the center line at any point, if I start imagining that I'm going to generate force on the diagonal, look how her shoulder comes off the floor, right? As I'm already on the diagonal, then all I have to do is continue to move at this plane. But see how like she is really out of alignment here. So my likelihood of either getting the back control or getting to the side control position, again, if you're unfamiliar with the terminology, side control being I am at the side of her body, back control being back control usually either being in this position or again also with hooks in. My likelihood of getting to either of those control positions increases a lot when I just think about how can I put the person out of alignment. So again, usually I'm looking for this knee to go this way. Because when her knee is in this position, the first thing she has to do is to restore her alignment. If she doesn't restore her alignment, again, she's increasing the likelihood of me passing her. So usually she's going to try and do what we call a hip escape. So it's usually a shift in the hip positioning. Exactly. So from here, she's going to step the other leg over and restore her alignment. And this puts her back in the neutral zone. Okay? So this is kind of what I mean about the knee alignment.
It's the same as almost if you think of if you're on your back and the floor is right there. Like it's
absolutely. Yeah.
So you just think of what the floor
alignment with the floor.
Yeah. But no, like it's around the floor. The floor was here. It's This
Yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah.
it's just
Oh,
flipped,
gotcha, yeah.
Right.
Right.
So the same thing.
Yeah.
How you
I
do the floor.
fell over.
You're not here, and if the floor was here, try to see how
Absolutely,
you would be
and-
stable on if this was a floor, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Because you can do these drills on the wall, actually.
Yeah.
But another thing for the bottom player, because I feel like you were going to talk about the bottom player. So their role is to like put themselves back into alignment. So at least they have a neutral position where they're not winning or losing, but they can still maintain their positional integrity in this position. And another thing for her as well, she doesn't want to have her legs at this angle. Like go back to this, yeah. Because once she's at this angle, it also becomes harder for her to generate power into me, unless I'm standing directly in front of her, right? Like how I like to highlight it as a bottom player, or what we say guard player, because this guards being I say it's like a movement category in jiu-jitsu pretty much. If I'm here doing a leg press at the gym, right, I'm really strong in this position because this is how we squat, right? If suddenly my legs are in this direction and I don't move my spine, see how I'm in this flat back position with both of my shoulders on the floor? I can't effectively generate power here. I feel like I'm using a lot of core tension here just to keep my back on the floor. So the best solution usually is to try and restore my alignment. So then from this sort of position, again, I'm strong and I can manage the distance well. If I have to shift my leg positioning, how I like to use this analogy, I have headlights in my hips. I want my headlights to face the same direction as my legs. So if my legs face this direction, I have to move this direction. And in order to reinforce my legs that may go out of alignment because of my top partner, I sometimes use the reinforcement of my elbow and my hand underneath my knees. At least here I have a bit of a temporary frame to stay and try and understand how can I readjust my alignment to be in a better position with structural integrity. There. Any questions so far before I move the slide on?
I just like the potential for strengthening those kind of diagonal positions for your hips, to gain leverage, just like in training. Put yourself in a position in that diagonal here and create leverage moments for yourself through here and also through here at a variety of different angles and lines.
Absolutely.
Regardless of where your shoulder is anchored.
Especially
in the
because
ground.
like from here, I understand when my knee is on the floor, that especially if she's trying to come past my hip line, she's essentially got the ability to fix my leg to the floor, right? So this is already a type of movement restriction. So what I like to do is prevent my leg. Yeah, you good. I appreciate it though. What I like to do from here is always use my arm as a wedge. So if I use my arm as a wedge, I still have this little moment where I can use active toes.
Sure.
Active toes being really important because I still have the ability to pivot from here. I still have the ability.
It's like you're dancing, right?
Absolutely, kind of.
You
yeah.
can use your toes to move.
Absolutely, because there are a lot of inversions and stuff. And not that it's necessary in jiu-jitsu. Again, it's a stylistic thing, but it's important to find these moments where, like, again, I'm always trying to keep myself in a position where I have structure. I don't want to be in a position that doesn't have structure because that is an opening for my partner to find a better control. Yeah.
A lapse in the frame.
Absolutely. But of course, like, when we look at it from the lens of collaboration, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing to be found in a position where you're vulnerable or in extension. What is important is that you recognize that you are in this position where you are vulnerable. And, that means when you do go into a more high stress environment in jiu-jitsu, that you can recognize it and then you will hopefully prevent it from happening in this more high stress environment. When it's collaborative, it's like, oh, okay, I recognize I was in a vulnerable position. This idea of floor rolling is usually like, okay, I put you in a vulnerable position, you realize it. It's like catch and release. I'm not going to try necessarily submit you and hold you for like 5 minutes, because that's very unproductive to just hold. I always say to people, you want to hold someone, go home. It's like, yeah, you know, it's not productive for the practice. I think if you do catch and release, you enhance the number of scenarios you can be put in. I think I put positional exchange at the forefront of the practice. How many different positions can I get into? But this goes a bit more into format of how we roll and what are the parameters of the session. I like to often place different parameters because sometimes doing as many different positions as possible makes it very messy sometimes as well. Sometimes you can make the parameter very simple and just think, oh, I'm just going to observe the relationship of my knee with my center line for the entire roll and see like what have I found just thinking about that, rather than making it grossly overcomplicated. Like, oh, I need to get an arm bar every time in this scenario. Rather like, oh, I see, I have this many opportunities to put my partner out of alignment. But again, it depends, it's a very personal goal, so on and so forth. Okay, this is a nice one. When I'm with my partner, let's say this time I'm the bottom player. Sorry, Sam, can I borrow you? If I'm the bottom player this time and she's the top player, my goal usually is either to get a submission or I have to understand how can I put her to the floor. Okay, so what I like to describe is usually how many different directions can I move her that I can manipulate her center of mass. Okay, so give me a stagger stance. Like, this one. You've never done that before.
Did it use it?
So understanding just from this stance, usually she wants to come forward into me or slightly to the diagonal of me, right? So I'm usually in this. I'm usually in this sort of position. So I understand that she is forward loaded in this position, okay? And from here already I can tell you that I can move her backwards in space, to the left, to the right, to the left diagonal, to the right diagonal. Okay? And when I can understand how many different directions I can move her body, I can start to understand, okay, what are the available movement patterns for her? How can I use my legs in such a way that I restrict some of her movement patterns, right? So this will also come into the later slide that I have a theme that is entirely on hooks. So if I have a hook around her front leg, okay, I have this hook. I'm restricting, or rather limiting, her movement available in this leg. If, let's say, I have a wrist grip for now. She's not wearing a gi, you might grab the wrist. No, that's okay. It's okay. In this way, again, I'm restricting enough. I have information. I have sensory information of like where she can go, but I'm like holding on to her. I have, at the moment, several points of contact with her. So I can understand, okay, she can go in this direction, she might decide to move backward, she might decide to move in like an arc-like fashion this way. So the more I can limit her body with my limbs, the more I can predict what she can do. If I want to bring her to the floor, I have to understand how can I move her center of mass. Usually I'm thinking about one really basic one, just to give you a bit more insight. So her center of mass right now is more or less in between her feet, around where I'm bouncing my foot, okay? In order for me to bring her overhead, I need to have a substantial shift in the center of mass to be over my hip line. Because when she's over my hip line, you'll see that she will have the necessity to post her hands. Right? So we also call this concept active posting. Can you put the key on? Thank you. And it goes back to again, this gross oversimplification of me standing completely upright. It's really easy to see how the center of mass will change here.
So the gi is a technical tool that allows you to focus on, manipulating the person without injuring their joints as much. Is that what that is?
I feel like you can understand the concepts of jiu-jitsu you can understand the concepts of jiu-jitsu better with the gi. Because I feel like you can understand directional change almost better. Because again, like in what we call no-gi, so without the kimono, there's a lot of these, with this one, a lot of these cupping grips. So we call it a C grip, or I like to call it sometimes hamburger grip, so it's a bit more visual for people. There's a lot of these cupping grips, but because no-gi gear is so smooth, it doesn't actually really emulate what's real life. Although there is, again, going a bit on a tangent, there's a differentiation between like self-defense jiu-jitsu and sport jiu-jitsu. Okay, like self-defense jiu-jitsu should be very like staccato. It should be very efficient. You shouldn't be like, oh yes, I'll go through like the most movements.
Quick and get out.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be like very, very to the point. Okay. But going back to this point before I forget where I am. So from here, so since she has the gi on, I can actually use the collar grip. Again, when I can control her head, I can control her spine. And this is the reason why I like the collar grip, because as soon as I pull down, this controls her head, her posture lowers, and it's easier to manipulate her center of mass. Notice how now I will bring my knees to my chest. As I bring my knees to my chest, it means she's closer to my hip line. As I extend my leg, again, she's going further and further over my center line, okay? And see, now I see this disconnection of the feet to the floor. This means that she has lesser points of contact here. Now I have to understand how do I directionally change her in space that I can find out, oh, now I can put her down. So, again, it's all weight shift. Any questions before I continue to elaborate? Does it make sense so far, the weight shift?
I enjoy the notion of manipulating her center of mass, not just past your hip line, but that's still essentially your center of mass and your center of leverage, before you can actually manipulate her over the top into a different position. And then also the gi as like external fascia.
Absolutely, I like that. I like that a lot. There's also understanding like certain types of weight shift, it doesn't always involve like losing balance or disconnection of a limb from the floor, right? If we go on the mat so I don't ruin your body. Turn this way. So another thing I could do, for example, if we're about to go onto it in the next slide, it's the topic of connection and sensitivity. Like, how do I use connection with my partner to better control them? I know it sounds like really almost like terrible in terms of like a human context. But connection and movement restriction. The ideas of push and pull is strongly rooted with connection. I am pulling her cross sleeve here. I'm gonna cup her right heel, okay? So as I push with my left foot into her hip and I pull with the sleeve, I'm creating a certain amount of pressure into her hip, okay? Again, because I'm limiting her in several different ways, it's really easy for me to understand, okay, the last obstacle here is that her left foot is fixed to the floor, right? And I can more or less understand where her center of mass is here. So if I continue to push her in a direction that falls away from where she's fixed to, the weight shift is suddenly in this direction. So already we've demonstrated overhead principle of sweeping, right? So the overhead principle of sweeping is that I load the person onto their hands in a way that I can make them fall to the side. This is already one thing. The other thing, this is from a forward weight shift, right? The front leg is super loaded. And then I start manipulating where the hip is. This is a disconnection from the back. Now it's like you only have one variable to play with. As this starts to become more disconnected, you're going to end up sweeping the person. The second one that we already played with is sweeping the person into the back space to get them to the floor. So this is from understanding how do I manipulate the torso in relation to the lower body, right? Like if you pull my body and I don't do anything, I'll fall over in the front space. So the natural reaction of, the natural appropriate reaction should usually be, if the torso is leaning forward, I stick my lower body back, because in this way I can still balance. But this means that I'm super loaded on my rear leg, right? So understanding that this is a fixed point. Whenever I have a lot of load in my leg, I have quite limited mobility here. I'm very grounded in this position. I was using the cross sleeve grip just now, and also the front, cupping the front leg, right? So again, these two are fixed points. So you only have one more variable to play with, which is the rear leg. So if you continue to push and exert force into my hip and swipe this out of the way, which is what I did to Sam, this is what happens. Okay? So now if you think about how I like to think about sweeping a person or bringing a person to the floor, I kind of draw like a wish. Actually, can I borrow your book? Okay, so, oh God, I can't do straight lines today. More or less, you have something like that. Like an asterisk, pretty much. But then it becomes a bit more sophisticated as well, because we don't usually go in straight lines. It become more like an arc as well. So I had like a really nice annotation of this, but I left my notebook in Hong Kong, which wasn't very useful, so I apologize. But then it becomes a bit more arc-shaped, because a lot of things in Jiu-Jitsu I actually believe are rooted around circularity. But again, this is a very abstract concept that I'm trying to work on articulating too, because this ideas of circularity also came from this idea of how we enter the floor is almost like this arc, you know? If I go completely straight down, again, a lot of impact. If I slowly dissipate it over time by making this more gradual level change, essentially I'm extending the amount of time that it takes me to get to the floor. So the energy dissipation becomes less and less and less and less
All our
impact.
muscles are circular and spiral. So
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
just going along this way.
The bones themselves are not straight, but
And if you even think about gymnastics, parkour, how you do a cartwheel and stuff, the cartwheel is not like a V shape. It's very much like a half circle to really efficiently transfer your body from this spot A to spot B. It's very much like this, except in Jiu-Jitsu, I find it to be a lot more like this way.
Which is funny because in a lot of weightlifting diagrams, there's always the straight line, but it's never actually a straight line.
Yeah, that was pretty
Right,
funny,
yeah.
right?
Well, in swimming, there's a lot of, elliptical behaviors and circular behaviors based on, articulations of the main joints and spinal segments and movement modalities. And then in running, just the same. Everything's elliptical and circular.
I want to do less of the theory and actually get us into action. Let me just check all of those. PCs are driving me insane. Okay, so just to briefly hit on this, because it was very related to what we were doing here, this idea of the push and pull. If the resultant force is not zero, it means the person is moving. Okay, so this idea of oppositional force, two forces going into together. If the force is equal, this means the resultant force is zero because the object or the person isn't moving, right? So we find ourselves in equilibrium. This was the same thing that happened just now with Sam when prior to the moment of me sweeping her, I'm pushing and pulling just enough that she stays there. If the resultant force is not zero, then she'll still be in motion with me. So this idea of connection, because sometimes it becomes really like not to put down anybody in the jiu-jitsu community or stuff, but a lot of people like to over-glorify themselves and think, oh, I am this jiu-jitsu god, I know this connection theory, I don't know how to explain it, but I can do it. I think in order, this is just my personal way of explaining it, that I have found is working out for me and for some of my students as well. I don't claim for it to be like the be-all right now, but I feel like a lot of the principles of connection is through pressure and through application of force. And again, this idea of oppositional force and resultant force. So anytime you think, oh, if we're at equilibrium, it has to mean that the forces are equal. So a lot of the principles of jiu-jitsu are rooted in just basic high school physics, actually, which is pretty interesting. But let's stand up, let's find a space in the room. The first exercise is going to be very simple, okay? I just want to begin to move with my partner in space. So the first exercise, I like to highlight that there is a role of leader and follower. But now it'll be an alternating role, just to make the exercise very clear. Okay? So I'm going to have the palm of my hand on his upper chest. And the idea is I don't want to push him to insinuate a directional change. Like, I don't want to say, like, let's go this way. Right? I want to see what is the bare minimum that I have to exert, or like, there's a lot of sensory information in our hands, okay? And skin in general has a lot of ability to receive this information. I want to just be able to even use just this articulation of my hand into his torso, and through the suggestion of my body, like if I start to walk into him, again, I would not be talking as I do the exercise. But what is the bare minimum that I can convey to him that I want to change directions? So don't make it overly complicated at first. I've already started to change directions. I want you to really, really simplify it first. You're just literally going to be going up and down on your partner and switching roles. Okay, so if you go one more time. My palm on his upper chest. I'm just going to walk a straight line back, and then I find myself at a stop at some point. So ideally, we want to grow into complex movement. We don't want to start with a complex movement. The same reason why I always talk about starting from collaboration and then going on to a resisted exchange, okay? So then after I've done the leading role, I will become the follower afterwards. After you've exchanged both roles, then you can start to add directional changes, okay? So you can try and see, oh, how could I make them walk in like a circle maybe? And how else can you even use your head to insinuate that you want to grow into a different direction? Okay. So just try this out, find a partner. Let's just find any of the lines that you like. We're all adults. You know how to walk in straight lines, I hope.
Standard. The first one.
I don't know which one you meant to go first, but.
You can do the push test. Do you want me to?
It's concerned about what's my man.
And really be honest with yourselves. Like, are you really doing the bare minimum? Do you feel like you're slightly pushing? Try to not find a disconnect of your palm with your partner's body. Like really try and get the shape of your palm to completely melt into your partner's body. This may take a few attempts. Like, don't be disheartened if it doesn't work the first time. This is about just slowly building the dialogue with your partner, understanding like, oh, okay, they don't get it when I do it this way. How can I adapt better that I can still convey this information? Sometimes it might involve walking slower. Sometimes it might involve you taking tiny, tiny, tiny steps.
The backwards part is hard.
How to create a void while still having contact, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you might even just have to stand closer as you take the steps. If you feel like your body is super far away and you're becoming a Jedi from Star Wars, then we can keep trying to adapt our strategies to communicate better with our partners. Really try and keep your palm connected to her. Remember, the more that you apply a certain amount of pressure into your partner without pushing, there's a differentiation between just applying firm pressure and pushing. You're not trying to impose a direction on your partner, you're trying to suggest a direction for them. They're trying to listen to the suggestion in this exercise. If you've already changed directions, you can start to experiment with hand placement. So, how would it work if I place my hands on my partner's back instead, or on the side of the shoulder? Do your little dual partner investigation before we go to the next exercise. Remember, tempo is an art. If you feel a tempo change with your partner, you have to adapt to their tempo in order to move together as a unit. If you don't adapt to this tempo change, the exercise becomes very disconnected. And slowly finding an end, maybe in the next 3 moves.
You cue so well with your body. It's good. It's good. Rather than see you, you're cute.
So